The sun had long slipped behind the mesas when Luke Carver found her. The desert was cold now, the heat of the day burned away to nothing but a faint shimmer rising from the rocks. His horse, Dusty, slowed to a halt as Luke squinted through the twilight. There, half hidden among the scrub and sage, something moved. At first, he thought it was a coyote, but when the faintest cry reached his ears, weak and ragged, he swung out of the saddle. He crossed the sand quickly, boots crunching, rifle slung over his shoulder. When he reached her, he dropped to one knee. She was lying half in the dust, half on a patch of brittle grass, her dark hair tangled with grit and blood. Her skin was the deep bronze of desert clay, but pale now under the fading light. Her clothes, buckskin and woven fabric, were torn at the shoulder, where crimson had soaked through. One of her hands gripped the wound, trembling. Luke's heart clenched. She was young, maybe 20. Her breathing came in short, painful gasps. "Hey," he said softly, lowering his voice so it didn't spook her. "You're all right now. I ain't gonna hurt you." Her eyes shot open, dark, sharp as flint, and she tried to pull away. "No," she gasped in broken English. "Go." He lifted his hands, showing they were empty. "Easy. I ain't your enemy." Her gaze flicked to his hat, his boots, his gun. To her, he was just another white man, maybe one who'd caused her pain before. Luke could see it in the way her jaw tightened, the way she tried to crawl backward even though her body was shaking from blood loss. "Ma'am," he said, gentler now, "you're hurt bad. You keep moving like that, you won't last the night." She stopped, panting. Her hand slipped from the wound, and he saw the arrow still buried there, just below the collarbone. It wasn't deep enough to have killed her instantly, but it was bleeding slow and steady, a cruel kind of wound. Luke swallowed hard. He knew what he had to do. "That needs to come out." Her eyes widened in fear. "No," she whispered. "It hurts." "I know," he said. "But if I leave it, you'll die." The desert wind whistled between them, carrying the faint howl of a wolf from far off. The sun's last light caught the silver of his spurs. She looked at him, torn between fear and the dim spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, this stranger meant what he said. Her strength gave out, and she slumped against the ground, breathing shallowly. Luke pulled a small knife from his belt and grabbed his canteen. He worked quickly, pouring water over the wound to wash the dust away. She flinched, a broken sound catching in her throat. "There," he murmured. "Easy now. You're all right." He could see the arrow's shaft, barbed, cruelly twisted. Probably from a rival Apache band or a raider's ambush. Whatever the story, she'd been left for dead. Luke steadied her shoulder with one hand. "Listen," he said quietly, "you got a name." She blinked through the haze of pain. "Tyanita," she whispered. "All right, Tyanita," he said. "I'm Luke. I'm gonna get that arrow out, and you're gonna breathe through it, all right?" Her lips trembled. "There, it hurts," she moaned softly, clutching at his arm. "I know, darlin'," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "But you gotta trust me." The moment she gripped his sleeve, something inside him shifted. It wasn't pity, it was something deeper, older, like the ache of seeing a wounded creature too proud to cry for help. He snapped the shaft off with a quick motion, and she gasped, eyes flying open in shock. Tears mixed with the dirt on her cheeks. "Easy," he murmured again, working as carefully as he could. He reached for his knife, cut around the wound, and with one steady pull, drew the broken head free. Blood welled up bright against her skin. She turned, her face toward the sky and whimpered something in Apache, something that sounded like a prayer. Luke pressed his handkerchief against the wound, holding it firm until the bleeding slowed. The moon was climbing now, cold and distant, casting a silver light over the two of them. Tyanita's breathing steadied little by little. She was still trembling, her body slick with sweat. "Why?" she whispered, voice faint. "Why help me?" Luke sat back on his heels, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. He didn't have an answer that made much sense. "Don't know," he said finally. "Guess I couldn't ride past and leave you to the coyotes." She gave a weak, bitter smile. "Cowboy heart," she murmured. He chuckled softly. "Ain't sure that's a good thing." He tore a strip from his shirt and bound her shoulder tight, his hands steady despite the tremor he felt inside. The heat of her skin, the rise and fall of her chest, it reminded him how close she'd come to slipping away. When it was done, he built a small fire a few feet away, feeding it with dry mesquite branches. The flames caught quickly, painting the sand in gold. He glanced back at her. She was watching him through half-closed eyes, exhaustion pulling at her. "You'll be all right," he said softly. You just rest. Her lips parted slightly. You could have left, she murmured. Why stay? Luke tossed another branch into the fire. Ain't much good at walking away from someone who needs help. For a while, there was silence except for the crackle of the flames and the soft rasp of the wind moving through the sagebrush. Tyanita's breathing slowed to an easy rhythm. Luke leaned against a rock, tipping his hat low, watching the firelight dance across her face. There was strength there, even in her weakness. A fighter's spirit, wild and fierce, but human all the same. He found himself wondering who had hurt her, who had left her to die out here. He didn't know, but he had a feeling he'd find out. Before long, the wolves began to howl again, closer now, carried on the wind. Luke reached for his rifle and chambered around, eyes scanning the darkness. She stirred at the sound, eyes fluttering open. Wolves, she whispered. Yeah, he said. They smell blood. She shivered. You should go. He shook his head, voice steady. Not a chance. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, the wounded Apache girl and the weathered cowboy, bound together by circumstance and something neither could name. When she finally drifted into uneasy sleep, Luke sat guard beside her, the rifle across his knees, the fire painting his face in copper light. The desert around them whispered with life, the rustle of lizards, the wind through the rocks, the distant, haunting calls of coyotes. When dawn finally touched the desert, it came slow and pale, like a breath after a long night of holding still. The fire had burned down to embers, and Luke Carver sat slumped against a rock, rifle across his lap, hat tipped low. His eyes were red from watching the darkness, from listening for the wolves that had prowled just beyond the light. He looked toward the sleeping girl. Tyanita. Her breathing was steady now, though her face was still drawn tight from pain. The wound on her shoulder had stopped bleeding, but her skin had that gray pallor that worried him. She needed water, maybe food, and shelter before the sun rose too high. Luke rubbed his jaw, feeling the rough stubble there. Well, girl, he murmured to his horse, looks like we're not riding alone today. He set about packing what little he had. A few strips of dried meat, a canteen half full, and a coil of rope. The desert didn't forgive carelessness, and he knew traveling with a wounded woman would slow him down, but leaving her wasn't an option. Not after last night. When he knelt beside her again, she stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, hazy with fever. You still here, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Told you I don't walk away easy. She blinked against the sunlight, confusion flickering in her gaze. Why, you are Cowboy. You hate my people. Luke shook his head. Don't know where you got that idea. Hate's a heavy thing to carry. I just mind my own business. She tried to sit up, grimacing as pain shot through her shoulder. He reached out, steadying her before she fell back. Take it slow. You're weak as a newborn calf. Her eyes narrowed. You talk too much. That made him chuckle. Maybe, but it keeps you awake. He tore another strip from his shirt and dabbed the sweat from her brow. The desert sun was climbing now, spilling heat across the land. The air shimmered above the rocks, and far off, a hawk circled lazy against the sky. We need shade, he said. There's a shack about 2 miles north. Used to belong to a trapper. I can get you there. She hesitated, looking out over the endless horizon. You take me to white man's place. He paused. Ain't no man's place anymore. Just 4 walls and a roof. It'll keep you alive. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she gave a small nod. All right, I trust you, Cowboy. Luke felt something tighten in his chest at those words. Trust was rare in the desert, rarer still between their kind. He helped her to her feet, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. She winced as she leaned against him, her bare feet leaving faint prints in the sand. The scent of smoke and wild sage clung to her hair. They moved slow, step by step, Dusty trailing behind with the reins looped over Luke's wrist. The sun beat down fierce, and sweat ran down his neck. Every few minutes, he stopped to let her rest. Once, when she stumbled, he caught her before she fell. She looked up at him, eyes glistening with a mix of pain and pride. "You think I am weak?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, ma'am, I think you're tougher than most men I've met." That brought a flicker of a smile to her lips, faint but real. By the time they reached the shack, the day had grown blistering hot. The structure sat at the edge of a dry wash, weathered and half buried by sand. The roof sagged, but it held, and the inside was cool enough to breathe again. Luke led her in, easing her down onto an old cot that still had some canvas left. He fetched water from the barrel out back, tested it, then brought it to her lips. She drank greedily, though her hands trembled so hard he had to steady them. Easy, he said, you'll make yourself sick. She pulled away, wiping her mouth. You sound like old woman, she muttered. Luke grinned. Maybe I am. He turned to rummage through an old trunk in the corner and found a few rags, some whiskey, and a bit of dried tobacco, nothing useful for comfort, but enough to clean her wound again. When he came back, she was watching him warily, like she still didn't know whether to thank him or curse him. He poured a little whiskey on the wound. She gasped, clutching his arm. There, it hurts, she whispered again, eyes wide. He froze at the sound, same as before, feeling that pull in his chest. I know, he murmured. But pain means you're still alive. She blinked away the tears. My people say pain is the spirit leaving, making you strong. Then you're about the strongest person I've met, he said quietly. Her gaze softened. She studied his face, sunburned, lined, and honest. You have no wife. He hesitated, then shook his head. No, used to. Lost her long time ago. She nodded slowly. You still wear a ring. He looked down at his hand, where a thin silver band glinted faintly. He'd forgotten it was there. Yeah, he said softly. Guess I do. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Outside, the wind picked up, stirring dust through the cracks. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled, a rare sound in that dry country. Tyanita closed her eyes and whispered something in her own tongue. It sounded like a song, low and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of the desert itself. Luke sat beside her, listening. There was something haunting in it, something that carried sorrow and peace all at once. When she finished, he asked quietly, what's it mean? She looked at him. It means, you saved me. So now my life belongs to you. He blinked, startled. That ain't how it works, ma'am. She tilted her head. In your world, maybe not. In mine, it does. Luke leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Don't say things like that. You don't owe me nothing. I just did what anyone should have done. She smiled faintly. No, Cowboy, not anyone. Her words hung between them, heavy as the heat outside. Luke couldn't find anything to say, so he stood, went to the door, and looked out at the horizon. The storm clouds were gathering, bruised and purple, sweeping in from the west. Behind him, he heard her whisper, you will go, after storm. He hesitated, hand on the doorframe. Maybe, but not before I know you'll be all right. She didn't reply. When he turned, she'd fallen asleep again, the faintest hint of peace on her face. Luke watched her for a long time. He didn't understand what bound them, two strangers from worlds apart, but he felt it all the same. Maybe it was loneliness, maybe it was fate. Outside, lightning cracked across the desert, and rain began to fall, soft at first, then steady, turning the dust into the scent of life. He set his hat on the table and leaned against the doorway, watching the storm roll in, knowing that somehow, the world had changed again, and this time, he wasn't sure he wanted it to go back.